My name is Dean Murray, New York State Senator for the 3rd Senate District here on Long Island. I am also a member of the Crime Victims, Crime and Corrections Committee for the New York State Senate. And with me is the ranking minority member of the committee, Senator Rob Rolison, who's joined us from the Hudson Valley. And from all the way in Nassau County, we have, who crossed over the lines, got his passport stamped, we have Senator Steve Rhodes from the 5th District. I'll let them introduce themselves right after. I'd like to first explain why we're here, and then explain and give a little rundown of who's joining us and who will be speaking to us tonight. And we're here because we need to hear from the experts. We need to hear, most importantly, from crime victims and the loved ones and family members of crime victims, in my opinion, the most forgotten people in New York State. Again, my opinion, we don't do near enough for those that have been victimized. I think it would do everyone good to look up the definition of what a victim is. They didn't ask for any of this, and yet sometimes they end up with a life sentence themselves in just dealing with the crimes that have been committed against them. So we decided to put this together to listen, to gather information, and then we will put together a package of bills that we will be introducing in Albany in the coming session in 2026 that we hope will empower the victims, give them a voice, and hopefully change some of the laws that desperately and policies that desperately need to be changed. So I just want to run down who's with us tonight. We will have 3 initial segments, 20 minutes each. The first segment is our district attorneys. We have a district attorney from Suffolk County, Ray Tierney, and we have Daryl Levy, Deputy Bureau Chief of the Nassau County DA's Major Offense Bureau. The next group will be our law enforcement group. We have Police Commissioner Kevin Catalina from Suffolk County, Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder from Nassau County, as well as our PBA representatives, Charles C.J. Hutter from Suffolk County PBA, he's the treasurer, and Frank Arcuri, the 2nd Vice President of the Nassau County PBA. We then have our 3rd segment will be victim supports organizations. We have Laura Ahern, Executive Director of the Crime Victim Center, and we have Wendy Linsalata, the Long Islanders Against Domestic Violence. She also is the Executive Director. And then we will hear from our crime victims, the family members, and their loved ones, and we'll announce them as they come up later. And that's it for me. I'd like to pass it along to Senator Rolison.
Thank you, Dean. And it's a pleasure to be here this evening at Suffolk County Community College. It was interesting. I came in and was driving around this gigantic campus, and what a beautiful spot this is here in Suffolk County. And as Dean said, I'm the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Crime Victims, Crime and Correction. I was a town of Poughkeepsie police officer for 26 years. I got on the job in 1982. I did 12 years in uniform, then 14 years in the Detective Bureau. During that time, I saw the evolution of policing. I also saw the evolution of how we dealt with crime victims. And there came a time where the term crime victim-centered approach was being used. It had been used before. And this is in the late 80s, early 90s. A lot of work was being done on behalf of crime victims, especially in the area of domestic violence and survivors and sexual assault. And then I had the good fortune, while I still was on the job in 2003, to become a member of the Dutchess County Legislature, where I served as the public safety chair and also was the chair of the legislature, continuing to work on things that benefited the public safety community, but especially crime victims and survivors. So when Dean had asked me a couple of months ago, hey, what do you think about this idea about doing a seminar to hear from the individuals who were in this arena, so to speak, on crime victims and what we need to do better in the state of New York, because as Dean said, we do need to do better. We have prioritized the other way, in my opinion, and that is unfortunate, because it is often said that being a crime victim is the loneliest place that you can be. And as a victim and a survivor, you never really get away from that. You may get to heal, but you still are that victim, you still are that survivor. And we owe it as a state, as a community, and I know the individuals that'll be speaking tonight are doing that every single day, and I applaud you for that. So Dean, again, thank you for having this. I know we're going to be at some point doing one in the Hudson Valley. I think Senator Gallivan is a former member of this committee. He's talking about doing one upstate. So again, thank you, and thank you for everybody coming out this evening, and it's good to be here with all of you.
I am New York State Senator Steve Rhodes, representing the 5th Senate District in eastern Nassau County. Thank you, Senator Murray, Senator Rolison, for being here and for your leadership on this important issue. The consequences of the election in 2018 represented a dramatic shift. It is by no coincidence that starting in 2019 with the passage of cashless bail and criminal justice reforms, the shift was away from the victims of crime and towards protecting those who are the accused, those who are criminals and their rights. And I think that one of the challenges that we face over the course of the last 6 years, you've seen small and incremental attempts to try and roll back portions of that law. But what has been lost are the crime victims in all of this and the consequences that this is having on them. In the drafting of that cashless bail and criminal justice reform legislation that passed back in 2019 and took effect in 2020, there were no real consultations with law enforcement, few consultations with district attorneys, certainly no consultations with the victims of crime. And while there have been efforts to place window dressing on what is a gaping hole in the foundation of criminal justice in the state, we wanted to have this conference today to be able to give voice to the voiceless and listen to our criminal justice professionals, our people who are in the trenches fighting to protect crime victims, which is why we have representatives. We have our Suffolk County District Attorney, and we have our Deputy Bureau Chief for Major Offense Bureau in the Nassau County Attorney's Office. We have our Police Commissioner from Nassau County. And we also have the Second Vice President of the Nassau County PBA. We have Charles Hunter from the Suffolk County PBA. And we also have our Suffolk County Police Commissioner, Kevin Catalina. But we also have the victims of crime who are going to come forward today, speak about their experiences, and speak about ways that we, as elected members of the Senate, can be pushing back in a more effective way. And also to mention some of the legislation that we have already introduced, in addition to other legislation that we hope to introduce that will be taken up by the majority to try and restore the balance between those who commit crimes and those who are the victims of crimes. So, for example, we have numerous bills that would repeal various aspects of cashless bail, criminal justice reform that would restore judicial discretion. I myself am carrying Senate Bill 7296, which would create the or dovetail off of a program that we created in Nassau County while I was a member of the Nassau County Legislature, the Office of Crime Victim Advocate, that would actually make a statewide Office of Crime Victim Advocate, which would actually assign counsel to represent the victim of crime to fight for their rights, as the DA's office so aptly fights for the people. The criminal defendants have their attorneys who are fighting to protect their rights. The statewide Office of Crime Victim Advocate would actually be there to fight for the rights of the victims as their legal representative. So we're hoping that that will see passage. But today is really an opportunity to hear from our experts and how we can more effectively be doing our job. I want to thank you again, Senator Murray, for organizing today. I look forward to hearing from all of our participants, and thank you all for your time.
Senator Rhodes, and also joining us, he's running just a few minutes late, Senator Mario Matera from the 2nd District will also be here shortly. But right now, I'd like to kick it off and get the first segment underway. I'd also, actually, before we do, also want to mention that we have a friend here. Brianne Wakefield is in the audience right now with us. She's chairwoman of Human Trafficking Task Force for Suffolk County Women's Advisory Council. So she's here also listening to gather information as well to work with us in the future. So wanted to recognize her. But let's kick things off now with our first panel, and start, I guess, with our district attorney from Suffolk County, Ray Tierney. Ray,
Sure.
welcome.
So, thank you. Daryl and I were talking, about this issue, and I think I'm a little older than Daryl. I'm sure you didn't know, you guys haven't noticed that, but I think when I started, right, I think, and probably even when Daryl started, it was a different system. It was they took victims' interests more seriously, and from a legislative perspective. When I started, one of the big sea changes was when I first started in 1992, victims didn't have an absolute right to speak at sentencing of the defendants. So that was something that was changed. And I think that, for whoever has been in this system as a victim or a family, a victim or victim's family, it's a rough system. It's, we have to ensure the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. All of the protections, they inure to the benefit of the defendant, which, I believe they should. But that's not to say we can't guarantee those protections for the defendant without considering the victims. And I think initially when I started in 1992, I'm sure Daryl, although Daryl didn't start with 1992, I'm sure he agrees with me. The focus has changed, and it went from a very we considered the victims to we sort of evolved from the system has become sort of indifferent to the victims, and now I would say that in many instances the criminal justice system and some of the recent legislation has become antagonistic to victims, and to me, I think a lot of it has to do with accountability. If victims and victims' families are not satisfied with the way things are, well, who can they hold accountable? And I think that accountability has been lost with a lot of the legislation we have. And I'll give you some examples. So yet we have diversion, right? Now I'm not against diversion, right? When it's appropriate, but we have in the narcotics sector, we have now judicially mandated diversion. So I'm the district attorney of Suffolk County. Daryl works in Nassau County. If Daryl does something in Nassau County that a victim's family is not happy with, right, or in Suffolk County that they're not happy with me, right, there is recourse, right? There's recourse through the political system, and they could say, we don't like the DA in Suffolk or the DA in Nassau or the DA in Westchester, their diversion program, whether it's too strict or too lenient. We don't like it, right? But we could do something, right, by exercising our rights at the ballot box. Now you have state-mandated diversion, right? And so someone sells a quantity of fentanyl that they know has killed people in the past. They sell it to another person, and that person gets charged, but now he gets diversion. And now all he has to do is go through counseling, and he gets out with no jail time. And that's mandated by the courts. So you can't complain to me. I can't do anything about it. Who do you complain to? There's no one to complain to. If you look at bail, right, there are certain instances, we can't argue dangerousness, but if there's an instance where you think someone that bail is appropriate, right, you come and the DA doesn't get bail, again, you can complain to the DA. Well, hold on, not always, because now the state has stepped in and said in certain instances, no matter what, the DA can't ask for bail. So even though you're dissatisfied, who do you direct that dissatisfaction to? I guess the state. Does the state care? But again, the ability of local jurisdictions, Suffolk County, Nassau County, to set their public safety agenda is compromised because the so-called experts in the state, and not these gentlemen to my right, but as a body, the Senate and the Assembly are saying this is what bail requires in Suffolk County. Darrell can't offer his expertise in Nassau. I can't offer my expertise in Suffolk. It is what it is. Parole, right? Elder parole, right? There was the Colin Ferguson case, right? And there was a whole trial. We all remember the Colin Ferguson case. And that judge issued a sentence which guaranteed that Colin Ferguson would never see the light of day. Now we have elder parole. And now at a certain amount of time, no matter what sentence was pronounced, if a person serves 15 years and is 55 years of age, that person automatically gets parole. Who do those victims complain to? They can't complain to Darrell. They can't complain to Darrell's boss. Not their fault. This is a law that was foisted upon them. I can tell you, I know what their position is. Their position is probably exactly what my position is. Doesn't matter. We still have to go through the parole hearing. Community notifications, right? If you have somebody who's a danger to children, is a danger because of either substance or alcohol abuse, is a danger because they're a financial, they're fraudsters, right? Well, now we have the clean slate law, right? So if a person steals everybody's identity and gets out and then does it again and nobody does anything about it, who do you complain to? Why didn't the DA's office, or why didn't the police, or why didn't another agency warn the public? Well, he's got clean slate. Can't do it. Again, it's accountability. Who do you hold accountability? I'll go back to the parole system. There was, when I first came in the DA's office, there was an individual who murdered, I believe she was a 7-year-old child, as she was coming home from church. He murdered her and left her, after he attacked her, he murdered her and left her. And I wrote a bail letter. And I said, let's be very clear. As long as I'm the district attorney of Suffolk County, we are never consenting to parole for this defendant. There are certain acts that are so heinous, that are so worthy of condemnation, that the perpetrators of those acts should never draw another breath of air ever again. Take aside their obvious dangerousness. Doesn't matter. That act is so reprehensible, that person should never be released from bail, released on parole. And I said, this is my position now. This is my position forevermore. And the reason why I said that is because what happens is every time there's a parole hearing, they used to be very vigilant in making sure prosecutors knew about the parole hearings, making sure that victims' families knew about parole hearings. Now, not so much. So you'll have parole hearings, and because of lack of notification, the prosecutor's office isn't letting people know what's going on. The victims' families aren't notified. Again, it's this antagonism towards victims that we're seeing, and a lack of accountability. Because again, who does that family turn to? The DA wrote a letter. The DA made explicitly clear, but for whatever reason, the parole board isn't hearing things. Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act. Finally, we have a bill for victims. Not so fast. Not so fast. The Domestic Violence Survivors Act says that if an individual is the victim of domestic violence, abuse, and that abuse was a factor that caused him to commit the act of which he's been prosecuted for, he can only serve a maximum of, I believe it's 5 years in jail. Is it 5 years in jail? Darrell knows. It's 5 years in jail, regardless of what we say, right? And when I say abuse, right? So if, a person's mom never hugged him and was a poor mother, and he's angry about that, he goes out and shoots his neighbor who never did a darn thing to him. If he could establish that abuse played a role in his commission of that murder, he does 5 years, right? And that is not a decision that I decide. That is not a decision that any DA's office decides. That is a decision that a judge decides after a hearing. That is an abomination. And when I was running for, when Newsday was talking about that, they called me up and they said, you know, we're hearing from practitioners around the state, and you're not consenting to any of these. In fact, you're fighting against these tooth and nail. And we want you to explain yourself. And I said, listen, I want you to write that. I want you to write that in your article, because that is a ridiculous law. And again, defendants are given multiple bites of the apple, and the definitiveness is gone. And I'm sure in Nassau County they have to deal with the same thing. So now when you take a plea, you got to make sure that they can't come back and say, all right, I'll do 20 years, and then after they get sentenced, they immediately file a motion under this Domestic Violence Survivors Act. So it's very difficult and very, very antagonistic to victims.
We're going to jump over to Daryl
Sure.
for a minute, and then we might have a couple of questions. So if you could just,
Thank you, Senators. I appreciate that. I agree with everything DA Tierney has said up to this point about the law, the state of the law, and victims being just forgotten. But I'm going to talk about it on a different level because DA Tierney was pretty clear about the state of the law. I was taught very early on when I started in 2006 that the victims are the most important part of what we do. And if you don't believe that, if you don't buy into it, then don't do the job of a prosecutor. I was told very early on that victims of a simple harassment, a neighbor dispute, they will be the most intense victims you've ever had. A neighbor throwing dog poop on the neighbor's yard. And they'll be the most difficult victims to deal with because they're so passionate about this. And I was taught so early on that they have to be felt to be the most important people because they are. They're the reason we do our job. There's a reason this system continues, is those people coming forward. And I think not only are the victims being lost on a very high level, but I think they're being lost in the lower levels. I think young attorneys, young ADAs don't know how to connect with victims. They don't know how to speak to them. They don't know how to talk to them like normal human beings. They lose that connection because they're so overwhelmed with discovery laws, with bail issues, with them saying, why isn't the legislature doing anything for us? We forget that this is something new for most victims. Yes, there are repeat victims, but everybody is a victim initially for the first time, and they have no idea what this system is. And we forget that. We forget that we should be talking them through every single stage of what's happening. We have the most amazing victim advocates in Nassau County. They are phenomenal with people. We don't have enough. We need the ADAs to do the same thing. It should be from the case's inception, no matter what the charge is. I work my way through harassment cases all the way to homicide cases, and I've treated every single victim of any one of my cases exactly the same. They all have my cell phone number. They call at 2 o'clock in the morning, I answer the phone. They want to meet on a Sunday at 11 p.m., I go to the office and meet them. They have to be made to feel that they're important, that they matter, and because if they don't feel that way, they're not going to cooperate with you. They're not going to trust you. They're not going to trust the system. They're not going to trust the judges. They think you don't care. And if you can't start off a relationship with the victim in the simplest of ways, the case is ruined from the beginning. And it can't be that way. I spent 3 hours today with somebody just listening to him. He was talking about being the victim of a horrific attempted murder back in May of this year. We talked about his family, his jobs, his friends, what he does for a living. He brought his parents in. We talked about their time in China. We talked about their time here. We spent the first 2 hours just talking like normal human beings that were sitting down on a couch somewhere and just learning about each other. That's not being done anymore. And when you have people who think no one cares about them, if you perpetuate that feeling from the very beginning, you've ruined everything. The police are in such a difficult position. Their hands are tied by the laws, the legislature, everything that Mr. Tierney had just said. They can't take the time on every single case to sit with these victims for hours. They want to, they do everything they can, but they need help. The laws aren't helping them, so we have to. And when they're brought to us, it just can't be another case. And I feel like victims feel that they're just a bother to the ADAs, to law enforcement, because they want answers. And of course they want answers because they have no idea what's going on. They've never been through this. They're not sure what an arraignment is, what a bail app is, what bail reform is, what discovery laws are, why in New York it seems like everything is in favor of the accused, not the victim. And you can tell them, you can walk them through every stage of this and say that, yeah, New York really is kind of leaning towards the accused. And just like Mr. Tierney said, that's the system of justice in every state across the country. Once somebody is charged with a crime, their rights matter, and they should, but not to the detriment of everybody else. A victim feels like a victim from the point in time they're actually victimized by that crime for the rest of their lives. It doesn't stop with an arrest. It doesn't stop with an arraignment. It doesn't stop with a guilty plea or a trial. It doesn't stop with a sentence. These cases just keep popping up and they keep ruining their lives over and over and over again. So I think we need to have a more open line of communication between actual victims, not just pluck one or two who go to these hearings and they talk about their horrific feelings and experiences they went through. We need these voices to be louder, which would include DA's offices speaking on their behalf. Advocates, I know we have them here. I can't praise them enough. The things they do and see and go through with these people. You're their lifeline. And without you, they literally feel like they have nothing. So the voices need to get louder. They need to be more cooperative in all the units that we can do. And I just have felt over the years, you can bring a victim bad news, and if you have that relationship with them, they're going to understand it and deal with it a bit better than if you had just said, we'll call you when something goes on. We're sorry this happened, but the case is over. We're sorry we have to give a plea, but that's what it is. You have to explain to these people every single thing that's going on. Is it difficult? Absolutely. Are there thousands of active cases where it should be done? Yes. Do some slip through the cracks? Unfortunately, it does. There's no excuse for it, but even when a case slips through the crack, you bring those people in and you let them be heard, even if it's just to us. If it's a judge, a legislator, senator, whoever it is, they just want to feel like they're being heard and not placated. And I think that is a lost art to go along with all the laws that are going against victims in this state. It just isn't working for them. And there has to be something like this, like we're doing here. It has to be more often. It has to be more people. People can't be afraid to come out here and speak the things that have happened to them, the things that they're scared of, the things that they don't understand. I think the problem is people are starting to get more and more either afraid or just unwilling to be open about what's going on because they feel nobody has their back. We chose this profession because we have their back. He's made it to where he is in this profession because he's done it for so long and knows those things. I think it needs to be taught from an ADA's inception in a case. You should be working with victim advocates from the very beginning. You should be speaking to senators and telling them what people are saying. And I was talking to Senator Murray earlier. I've heard ADAs say to victims, well, call your legislator. That's one of the most offensive things you could tell somebody in a time of horrific everything, is to just kind of say, you know what, the law is the law. We know it's the law, but you have to deliver it a certain way, and it can't just be as simple as, well, that's the law, sorry. They want somebody to be held accountable, and a lot of times it'll be the PD, it'll be us, it'll be the senators. They don't know that it's not us. They don't know that we're having these roundtables fighting for something to change because no one's talking to them. And it's just, it bothers me. It's bothered me for 20 years if I see a victim just kind of in passing, an ADA shakes a hand and says, thank you, I'll see you, or I'll call you in 4 months. If anything changes the case, I'll let you know. I'm not saying ADAs are doing bad by any means. I think it's just, we're stepping a bit further back from that personalization of each victim because it's incredibly difficult to do with the amount of cases we have.
I'm going to take a minute, and this is the first hearing or the roundtable we're doing, so I think we're going to take notes on how we can do better too, and I think maybe separate with just this, talking to the DAs, because we could go on for quite some time, as you can tell. There's a lot to talk about, but I'm afraid that we'll start running into the other segments, so why don't we do this? Does anyone have one question that we can ask quickly that, I think we're over a little bit right now. So is anybody, Rob?
I have one
Steve?
quick, yeah, I have one quick question, and thank you for your testimony and the discussion that we're having. Last year, the governor held up, and the legislature held up the budget for, I think it was 5 weeks on Discovery, which I would say was not much of a big change to Discovery at all, and I see your expression, so thank you on that. She's also said, and continues to say, that with the bail reform laws, it's the judges who are not applying. Okay, thank you for that. And then she's talked about raise the age. Just briefly, can you say how raise the age has empowered young gun toters to continue to commit crimes while they're in the family court system and not being tried as not being handled as an adult? And can be
Real quick, it just incentivizes gangs to use children to commit to carry out their criminal enterprises and their conspiracies. The difference of what Darryl can do to an adult who shoots somebody, as opposed to somebody who's under the age of 17, is markedly different. So what you're seeing is the drivers of violence, they're now children. So that's what, in short, that's what Raise the Age has done. But Darryl has anything to add to that.
And we're adding another fight as a prosecutor. Now we have to fight to try and keep it or bring it to county court as opposed to letting it go to family court where we know the punishments are non-existent. So it's an additional fight we're having to just charge these people like we would anybody else. And the age is getting younger and younger. And we're losing these cases where we would be holding these people accountable for years on end, as opposed to, well, we can't fight to keep them here because the laws say we can't. They go to family court. What happens in family court is the sentence is minimal at best, and they're out on the streets doing it again. And we've all seen it. It's an incentive to go younger. It's now utilizing children.
Interestingly enough, to the point of, from the victim standpoint, Ray, in your example, someone shoots someone, it doesn't matter what the age of the criminal was, someone got shot.
Absolutely.
There was a victim that got shot, and one will be punished, and the other one gets a slap on the wrist for what could be the exact same crime, and that's when you know you have a broken system. Do you have anything, Steve, real quick?
Yeah, the quick question would be, short of a full repeal, which I think are things that we're looking for, but short of a full repeal, what changes would you make that would make the most effective difference in your job to things like discovery reform, bail reform?
I think all those things that I talked about is if you just took the decision-making, take the decision-making out of the hands of the legislature and put it in the hands of the experts in court. So you have a judge, you have an advocate like Darryl, a prosecutor like Darryl, and you have a defense attorney. And he makes appropriate arguments, and the defense attorney makes appropriate arguments, and then the judge decides. Not this situation where, it doesn't matter what anyone feels because it's already predetermined this is going to family court or there's no bail or, what have you. So I think what the legislature has been doing with all these cases is they're taking the ultimate decision-making, they're taking it out of the hands of the prosecutors and the courts and putting it in the hands of the legislature.
And if I may, I feel that bail reform gets a lot of publicity, and it's a big issue.
Sure.
Discovery does not.
Right.
And discovery is an incredibly large issue with cases getting dismissed, bogging down the system. Listen, a defendant and their attorney are entitled to the material, but making these things that are completely irrelevant to a case all of a sudden that's why a case gets dismissed, because a napkin wasn't turned over that someone wrote something down on, or someone's background on something they did in the past that has nothing to do with this specific case. The amount of discovery, it's unattainable in the time periods we're getting here. We went from Rosario initially, which there was a time frame for that, to now these unmanageable time frames where it just cannot be done. Discovery is ending more cases than anything else. Bail is its own issue, but the discovery issue, I feel, impacts victims, prosecutors, more than almost anything at the moment, especially on the lower level misdemeanors and felonies. It's not manageable.
So you have an increased number of cases being dismissed on technicalities. Yeah. And whenever a case gets decided on anything other than the merits, that is by definition an injustice.
Yeah.
very, very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
And our next segment that we'd like to have come up is our law enforcement segment. So we'd like Police Commissioners Kevin Catalina from Suffolk. Thanks, Ray. Nassau County Patrick Ryder, Commissioner. And our PVA representatives, CJ Hutter and Frank Arcuri. So maybe I think a quick just introduction, and then we might just kind of pepper you with some questions, if that's all right. Sure. That's okay with you.
Kevin Catalina, Suffolk County Police Commissioner.
Pat Ryder, Nassau County Police Commissioner.
Frank Arcuri, Second Vice President, Nassau County PBA.
CJ Hutter, Suffolk County PBA Treasurer.
If you don't mind, gentlemen, I'd like to start with I'd just like to ask maybe to our PBA reps first, and that is, what are the police on the street? What is first off, the frustration when it comes to bail reform? But that's a whole separate. What do you hear? What are the officers hearing when you come to a crime and you've got a crime victim here and they may know of some of these problems we're having? What are you hearing from them? Is there a frustration? You heard the DAs mention that maybe victims don't want to help because they are cynical. They don't think anything's going to happen. Are you starting to see and hear that when you're at the scene of a crime and you're talking to crime victims?
Absolutely. The officers are definitely frustrated because they feel like their hands are tied most of the time. So there's really nothing they can do, as opposed to, I mean, they'll arrest somebody and 2 hours later the guy's out in the street to do the same thing. So it's almost like a revolving door.
And what are the victims telling you?
Sometimes it's like, maybe it's the same, he's done it again, and he just gets to go out again. I mean, you see on the news, the guy has 19 arrests and he's still out in the street committing the same crime.
Yeah, I think a lot of the victims are getting frustrated now because we see it all the time. We respond to, it seems like, the same call over and over again sometimes. Because even if you do catch the bad guy and arrest him, he's out sometimes that same night. So I think there's a definite, obvious frustration from the victims, but from the police officers responding too. It's like, how many times do we have to deal with this same thing over and over again? At what point are we going to make it where there's consequences for actions and there's real deterrence from committing the same behavior over and over again? Like, there has to be a deterrence. There has to be a reason for them to stop this repeated behavior.
Right. And when that happens to you gentlemen, then do you see it with recruiting? Is it hard to get officers now, or harder when they're hearing stories like this, or do we see them retiring sooner or leaving sooner just out of frustration? Do you see that?
Listen, I think thankfully in Suffolk County, we don't see that. We see frustration. There's certainly frustration on the part of the officers and I think their supervisors, but I wouldn't necessarily go that far. I think some people have been, maybe reluctant to get involved in the profession because of a lot of things that have happened over the last 5 or 6 years. I think we're starting to see a shift back towards people respecting law enforcement. And, again, I think thankfully in Nassau and Suffolk County, we don't have the recruitment problems that we do in some of the big cities and some, areas a little further west than us. But I certainly understand their frustration, and we do hear it all the time. And just, a couple of quick points, because I know we have to move this along quickly. So I had kind of an advantage, right? I started a long time ago in the New York City Police Department, but I had an opportunity to work in the Sheriff's Office in Suffolk County. And when I started there in 2018, we had around 1,800 inmates. And I don't want to talk for Sheriff Toulon. He's not here. I'm sure he would echo my sentiments exactly. Now we have around 1,100 in the jails in Suffolk County, and I think Nassau's numbers, pretty much mirror that. So that's 700 people that were incarcerated, right? If you could go back pre-COVID, I think you could argue would be incarcerated today, right? It would probably be around the same jail population. So there's 700 people that are out on the streets in Suffolk County that are not probably where they should be in jail. And I don't say just in jail for punishment purposes. I say a lot of times that 700 people, right, that demographic that we're talking about, oftentimes are the people that are the repeat offenders, right? They're the repeat misdemeanor offenders doing things like property crime and things of that nature. And they're doing it because they have an addiction to either alcohol or drugs or both. And sometimes the best place for them to be is incarcerated, because that's where they can get the help that they need. And that was an unintended consequence of bail reform. There is a segment of the population that should be in getting help. And I can tell you, probably the best place to get help for somebody who's experiencing those issues is the Suffolk County Jail. Errol Toulon does a phenomenal job of offering services to those people. And quite frankly, with this rinse and repeat fashion that unfortunately that we're in right now, they get arrested, they go back out into the street, they can't deal with their addiction, and they're going to commit crimes again, and it's going to happen over and over and over again. And to your point about the victims suffer over and over and over again. Frustrating for us. I also had the opportunity to be a precinct CO in New York City. I was a precinct CO for almost 8 years. I understood, right, at that smaller level, how effective you could be in law enforcement by targeting the individuals that were doing crimes like that, right? Like, say they're breaking into cars on a street on 155th Street, and you have 15 car breaks in 2 nights. That's 15 people that have to go out there in the morning and say, unbelievable. Again, what are the cops doing for me here? What's happening here? Why is this person still out breaking into my car over and over and over again, right? We would then maybe set up a surveillance on the street for a car break, which is primarily a misdemeanor, and catch that person. We had the ability back then to work with the court system and the judges to keep that person in on a bail if they were a repeat offender with a horrific record. We can't do that anymore, right? So that person goes right back out onto the street, victimizes on 155th Street again, because most of these people are creatures of habit, and that's what they do. Right? And we don't have the ability to take that person, put them where they need to be, which is in jail. Again, not only to help the victims, but to help them get the help that they need, which they're never going to get back on the street, because the addiction is too strong for them to really overcome it. And I'll end on this. I can't count how many parents of people who are in that situation came to us and said, thank God. Thank God they're where they need to be right now, which is in jail, right? When the people who made these laws made them, they did not take that into account. And unfortunately, they go back out into the community, suffer themselves, and cause other people to suffer too.
Well, basically, we're the same response almost. Nassau and Suffolk County, no recruitment problem in Nassau County, because the men and women that serve as our local politicians back the men and women who wear the uniform. They always stand with the men and women in blue. We don't have a recruitment problem. We'll hire cops. We train them at the best and highest levels. And then you put them out in the street, and then they get beat up with cashless bail and bail reform and discovery and raise the age. The system has been created to no longer protect the victim and to make the cop fail. They're trying to break us and see if we're going to not keep up 14 days of returning over the evidence. Oh, you forgot this discovery. You forgot that video. Dismiss that case. And then we got to go back to the victim, that same victim that we tell him, we're going to do the right thing here. We're going to make sure he stays in, and he's out the next day. We have learned nothing from the 80s when Kevin and I, young cops, went into the NYPD. We learned nothing about the revolving door. It doesn't work. We have to do more to protect our victims. Our cops sit there, they pour out, they do everything they can for their communities, and then they get kicked in the teeth when a stupid law comes out of Albany that we have to live with and we have to absorb. And and on top of it, there's no money behind it to say, hey, enforce this. And by the way, we're not funding that. We're not funding that. Find a way to fund it. So there goes my budget that I got to live with and say, I need now 25 discovery people so I can make the 14-day deadline for my victims. And then on the other side, I got to take it away from the cop on the street that is out there for my victims.
Gentlemen, follow up?
Obviously Albany is Albany, and we're in the minority conference, and we put bills together, well thought out bills for public safety, and they don't go as far as we want them to, or they don't go really anywhere. We do work together with the other side of the aisle. We make some modest improvements to public safety. So just real quickly, to the two commissioners, the crime victim services that you have within both your departments, if we can't keep people locked up and cases get dismissed and all the things that you're talking about, do we need as a state to be putting more money into crime victim services say at your level? Of course, we talk about the state level as well, but the state helping fund additional resources for crime victims in Nassau and Suffolk County. And the advocates, of course, being part of that discussion. I'm going to ask them that question too when I have the opportunity to.
We survive on our advocates that go out there and support these victims. They're the ones that find them housing, they find them funding, they find them resources and recovery and everything that they need. So we need that, because otherwise our victims sometimes can become repeat victims. So we appreciate everything they do. As far as what we do, we go above them. We've become the social workers. We've become the mentors. We become the follow-up that needs to be done. So yeah, the investment does need to be in that, but on top of it, it's not going to help if the laws don't change. The laws have got to change.
Yeah, I agree. I think, any help we can get with the victims, we will certainly take. It's heartbreaking dealing with the victim of a crime. And, to Darrell's point earlier, even if it's a lowly misdemeanor in the minds of maybe a judge or a cop or a DA, right? There's a victim there, right? And that victim was still victimized. So again, yeah, every victim is important. And we would certainly welcome any of that. But to Pat's point, what we really need is we need legislation to change it. We need judges to be able to exercise discretion, all right, is what it really all comes down to. If you have somebody who is a repeat offender, right, and they're out there victimizing the public, we need to be able to do something. It's just common sense. It's common sense. And again, 99 times out of 100, that criminal is in that situation because of a substance abuse problem. All right, maybe not 99, but let's say 97 out of 100. They're never going to get the help they need unless somebody forces them into that situation. And, oftentimes that's jail. I have friends that have been helped by jail. I have relatives that have been helped by jail. Jail is not necessarily this horrible thing that some people, claim that it is, right? When you have people like Sheriff Toulon, that is certainly a victim advocate, but also, an advocate for people who want to recover. They're going to get the help that they need, in a place that, some people, think that they're not.
And to your point, Commissioner, even for lower level offenses where the option may be, okay, you can spend time in jail or you can go to a treatment program. You're so correct in that it's denying even the criminal the opportunity to be able to get the help that they need so that can be part of the restoration practice to put them back into society. So really the very laws that have been passed are in many ways hurting the people that they are supposed to be helping. It makes absolutely no sense. No question.
On both sides of the aisle.
No question. And look, we're blessed in Nassau and Suffolk County to have some terrific leadership, both in the county legislature and with County Executive Romaine, County Executive Blakeman, safest county in America. Credit to you, Pat Ryder, to the county executive, to the legislature, mostly to the men and women of our police department who go out there and work so hard every day. A weak criminal justice system accomplishes nothing but creating more victims. That's simply the case. And unfortunately, with what we're seeing going on in this, or what we potentially expect will be going on in the city of New York, it creates additional challenges, particularly for Nassau County that are right on the border. How, for example, with the mayor-elect indicating that he wants to decriminalize misdemeanor offenses, for example. So in a simple shoplifting case where now, as long as you steal less than $999.99 worth of merchandise, you now won't be prosecuted. If that were to become law, how would you defend against that in Nassau County?
It's as simple as the kid who takes the cookie, right? Don't take that cookie, you're gonna get punished. You don't punish him, he's gonna take another cookie. They're gonna keep coming back to the well. Criminals that just have their way. And if they're not going to jail and you're not going to punish me, crime will go rampant in New York City. How are we going to defend it? We're going to build our own little wall between New York City and Nassau County. And it's going to be in law enforcement, it's going to be in technology, it's going to be in support, because we can do that. Because our legislators have backed us up, say, hey, How much for more cameras? How much for more technology? Let's do it. Invest in intelligence. Invest in sharing of information. That's how we fight crime. But it's not helping those victims now become their retail stores. They're victims also. And they're trying to run a business, a small mom and pop place that are going to be run out of business because the guy is going to keep coming back. We've seen it happen in California. You've seen it happen in Chicago. It's going on all in these different areas throughout the country. It's not going to happen here in Nassau County, and I'm sure it's not going to happen in Suffolk. But if it's on that border, they don't know the difference in the street. They just cross over and they start committing crimes here. In Nassau, you will get arrested.
I have no doubt about that. One last question. I know we're pressed for time. You know, we saw, for example, last week in Chicago, an unfortunate woman who was tragically killed by being burned on a subway train. We saw that repeat incident in New York subway not too long ago. In the case of Chicago, it was by an individual who had been arrested over 70 times and was still out on the street. You see the governor continuously reporting that crimes are down overall. How much of that is because you have victims who have simply chosen not to report crime because they think that nothing will happen? Do you see that as a problem?
I think we see it a little bit in the retail world. You know, we've done a lot to prevent that from occurring, and District Attorney Tierney has done a phenomenal job of working with us to aggregate the crimes, right? So if we have somebody who's stolen from a certain location, you know, more than one time, and we're able to put together what we call like a trespass affidavit program, we'll arrest them for a burglary and we'll be able to hit them with a higher charge. So, we have ways around that. I think that, you know, to Patty's point, I think we're doing, you know, a pretty good job in Suffolk County and Nassau County preventing that, you know, that West Coast attitude from coming this way. But it takes a lot of work, and you know, we have to, you know, treat every victim like, you know, they matter, and encourage these victims to keep reporting those crimes, those shoplifting type crimes, and you know, misdemeanor crimes. But I don't see us ever allowing it. I don't want to speak for Nassau, but I know Patty very well, and we share the same attitude, and the men and women of both police departments do as well. We're never going to allow that to occur in our counties. So, you know, and I don't think that's necessarily happened. I can't speak to what happens in New York City as far as their crime numbers go. I do know that there's a difference between what we call the 7 major crimes and crimes that are not reported, you know, to the FBI on that level, and also the perception of crime, right? Our job is to keep the people that we represent safe, but it's also to make them feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, then we're only doing half the job. And I think in certain jurisdictions, they don't feel safe. And because of incidents like, you know, we saw on the train, you know, in Chicago and then again in New York. So you have to do a little bit of both. And I think, you know, in our jurisdictions, we make sure that we do that.
All right, we're cut for time. I'm going to ask just one question, and it's a yes or no, okay? We've heard about, and I think in several examples has been given tonight, how important it is to consult with each other. When we talk about the sponsors of I'm not talking about us, you know, we communicate with you a lot of others do. Certainly your Nassau legislature, your Suffolk legislature, they talk to you. Did the sponsors of the bills in Albany, of bail reform, of raise the age, did any one of them ever reach out to get your input?
No.
No. One word, no.
There we go. Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you,
We
guys.
appreciate it very much. Like I said, I'm trying to keep it, what we're learning so far tonight is we need more time to definitely speak to you guys, because you've really helped a lot. So thank you very much. Thank you. Our next panel is our victim support organizations. We have Laura Ahern, Crime Victim Center Executive Director, and Wendy Linsalata of Long Islanders Against Domestic Violence, the Executive Director. Let me pull that. You have your little card? Oh, okay, maybe just a brief background, who you are, what you do, and then I think we'll get right into it.
Right in.
Right in.
My name is Laura Ahern. I am an attorney, a New York State licensed attorney, and also a New York State licensed social worker. I just saw on LinkedIn that I'm hitting the 30-year mark. So I've been doing victim services for nearly 30 years, and it's really a pleasure and honor to be here. I have lots to say. Do you want me to start now, or you want to introduce when? No, just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Wendy Linsalata. I'm the Executive Director at LI Against Domestic Violence. Thank you, Senator Murray, for organizing this. I, too, am approaching 30 years in the field of victim services. I have equally as much to say as my colleague here. And you want to start?
I'll start. So it goes without saying that everything that law enforcement said and our partners in law enforcement and our partners in the district attorney's offices, everything they said, I fully support. I can't speak for her, but I'm pretty sure she does too. What I'm going to do is start out with a particular, not too detailed on what had occurred on a domestic violence homicide, but this is going to give you sort of a view of what is needed. And you had asked a question about victim services, and I'll start out with that, what we need. Very recently, there was a very big shakeup in the Office of Victim Services. There was a mistake made. Somehow, we don't really fully understand, all of the 200 or so victim services contracts that were awarded as a result of a response to an RFP were overturned. All of us had to go back to our prior year contracts. So that was a significant disruption for all of the victim services agencies throughout New York State. That's the first issue regarding funding. Now I'll get into a particular case that the CVC worked on. On September 4th, 2024, 32-year-old Drew Garnier stabbed his 5-month pregnant wife to death, reportedly because he wanted a son, and she was pregnant with their third female child. He did this, mutilating her in front of their 2 children, who were 7 and 9, 2 girls. Then he turned the knife on them and tried to kill them. So imagine the boogeyman when you're a child, running around the house chasing you. Well, their own father was going around the house chasing them. I did contact Senator Murray, and he did help us a little. I'll get into that. But DSS up in Delaware County, because this is where it happened, just scoured the area looking for an organization, a crime victim center that could help them. And the family ended up coming to Long Island. So the Crime Victim Center did accept that case. And after that, it was all hands on deck, because that family had no house. They had no resources. They had no clothing. They had nothing, because those children were in a hospital for about 2 weeks and then came down to Long Island. So everything had to be done. So it was a coordinated response. We got them a house with the help of United Way and with a lot of the local unions who stepped up to make arrangements, open doors for us, and get everything accomplished they needed. Food, through Senator Murray, he helped us with that one. Clothing, therapy at our organization. School advocacy, the children had, a 5th grader had the reading and writing of a kindergartner when she first came down here. So we had to do school district advocacy. We had to do legal advocacy. Now imagine the house that the 2 owned, the deed was in the murderer's name and the victim's name. By operation of law, that deed goes to the next person, who is the murderer. There is no law that will prevent that from happening. There is something called the Slayer's Rule, but you have to argue that in surrogate court. So now legal advocacy is needed. There is no attorney that we could find pro bono that would do $25,000 worth of legal work for free. So somebody on our board stepped up and did that legal work. Now there's more legal work being done for the family. But something that's happening right now that is outrageous is that the now adoptive grandparent who was the father of the decedent wants the 911 tape. And it's the last words of his daughter, and he wants to hear them. And the state police is denying it. That's not acceptable. He should be able to hear those 911 tapes. There's about 5 calls that the defendant himself, while he was murdering his daughter, the defendant, called 911 5 times. So he deserves to have a copy of that, and he's not getting it. So that's the first issue. The second is we are proposing, I spoke with Senator Murray about this, that the state mandate a regional homicide victim services coordinator be appointed. So for every region, we have the ability to mobilize immediately. We did that this time, but if we could have legal pro bono services set up, I think it's a great idea, and I think that that's something that DCJS should be in charge of, because DCJS does a great job on, from our perspective as a crime victim center. Next, parole reform. We vehemently fought against the elder parole bill because we have victims right now, survivors of homicide victims, that every 18 months, when that defendant is coming before the parole board, every 2 years, they're entitled to that once they're eligible for parole. Every 18 months, these people have to launch a campaign to keep that murderer behind bars. And a great example is Kellyanne Tinez in Nassau County, Robert Gottlieb. Every time it happens, every 18 months, they have to launch a campaign to keep him behind bars. So our recommendation is to change parole eligibility hearing dates, not 2 years, 4 years. Every 4 years, because every year and a half, survivors, family members have to relive creating a campaign to keep that offender behind bars. So give them a little bit of a chance to breathe and heal. Next is Senator Martinez, and I know Senator Murray and all of the senators here supported the revenge porn law here in New York State. We'd like to see, and I know that, that Wendy had a lot to do with that, working with Senator Martinez as well. We'd like to see the threat, and that was something that Wendy brought up, the threat of disseminating non-consensual pornography, that's revenge porn, being criminalized.
I have a lot to say on that.
Yeah, she'll go. Next is orders of protection. Right now, when a probationer commits a family offense and there's a temporary order of protection issued, there is no family court notification directly to probation. That makes no sense. There needs to be. It gets entered into the state system, and they could see it, but it's not a proactive e-alert. There can be an e-alert done. They're doing e-alerts. What's that?
Who would you suppose?
It's probably DCJS, because it's DCJS and corrections together. So because they have shared data sites. Also, there's a problem with misdemeanor ever since bail reform. And somebody here was talking about misdemeanor offenses with the mayor in New York City. And, you know, we have the problem right now. Right now here in Suffolk County and in Nassau County, we have a problem because what bail reform did is that when there's a misdemeanor sex offense, there's an appearance ticket done. So then they show up in court later. But meanwhile, there's no order of protection issued, no criminal court. So in a non-domestic offense, there's no family court order of protection. Law enforcement tells people, oh yeah, go to Victim Services Agency, they'll get you an OP. You can't get an order of protection unless there's a family offense. So we had a circumstance where there was a professional who had done medical care on a teenager in a closed room, sexually assaulted her. It was a misdemeanor forcible touching, and there was no order of protection because he got a field appearance ticket, which means appear in court in 2 months. So there's no accusatory instrument provided, so there's no order of protection. So that change would be require orders of protection to be issued for misdemeanor sex crimes in the immediate aftermath of the field appearance ticket. Next, so New York State Department of Health is the one who's in charge of certifying rape crisis programs here throughout the state, and they require a 40-hour minimum training program. Each of us, as rape crisis programs across the state, has to create that program, and we get recertified every 3 years. But things change. After 1 month, we're starting the Crime Victim Center in Nassau County. Will be almost fully launched in December. We have new employees coming in at all times, and the training program can't be fixed unless they give us a training program that's fixed. Like ODTA and OPDV do a DVL, the Domestic Violence Liaison training. It's a fixed training. NISCATIV, New York State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, has a fixed training. Here's the training you have to take in order to do these services. Department of Health doesn't have that. So what ends up happening is organizations like ours and even Wendy's and across the state, we are in a position where if a new law changes and there's maybe a felony, a misdemeanor and a felony, we have to change the program. So there's no way to change it. So what Department of Health does is they accuse you of changing the program without approval. But there's no simple mechanism other than to recertify your whole entire program. It's not efficient, and if they did charge them with developing that program, let them tell us what you want as your core, and we'll do the local work. Sex offenders. So the organization, we are a crime victim center here in Suffolk County. We do domestic violence, sexual assault, and all violent crime. In Nassau County, we do domestic violence and sexual assault. But in addition, in Suffolk County, we have retired law enforcement that work within the organization, and we are partnered with the Megan's Law unit here in Suffolk County and somewhat in Nassau as well. But here, our retired law enforcement go out and verify the addresses of registered sex offenders to keep the registry up to date and accurate. So a couple of things happening on that end. One is military sex offenders. So when sex offenders are in a military prison like Leavenworth, they are released out into the community. And we had that here in Suffolk County. They're released out in the community without any community preparation. So nobody checks the site first. So in New York State, parole and probation, before somebody's released from jail, they'll check to make sure the site is safe. They don't do that with military sex offenders. U.S. probation and parole, the ones who supervise them, but they don't do a check. They just release them. So we could do something in our law to require if they're going to be living in New York State, there's some kind of prep required. Another issue is sex offenders being left on registries when they're deceased. So the death certificate has to be sent to DCJS, and death certificates are not easily gotten when towns are the ones that house them. So we need each county in New York State should have their own repository of all of the death certificates so the registry could be up to date and accurate. Lastly, when there is not enough evidence or for some reason an offender pleads down to endangering the welfare of a child, so you have a whole long list of penal offenses that are sex crimes, okay? The 130 offenses, there's the long list. Endangering the welfare of a child is not a sex crime, but what happens is offenders will plead down to endangering the welfare of a child, which is not a registrable sex offense under New York State law. So the endangering the welfare of a child, that's an easy one. All you have to do is add a subsection to endangering the welfare of a child to make it a registrable offense. Because if you're allocuting to a hands-on sex crime and you're not registering an offender, it's violating the federal rules, which could lead to losing burn grant money. And that's all I got.
We've been joined by Senator Mary Matera. Thank you. It's all right. We're running a little behind, so we're trying to play catch up here because then the next segment is our crime victims who we need to hear from. But Wendy, we definitely.
Okay, I will try to be brief, Senator. A lot of what I came prepared to say has already been said, so I echo a lot of what Laura has already discussed. I am in agreement with a lot of things that DA Tierney brought up, Commissioner Catalina, the commissioner in Nassau, in regards to bail reform. And I'm just going to speak from the victim's perspective as to what we're hearing from survivors. A lot of them are feeling a bit downtrodden. We do have people that there are repeat offenses. And when we mention, notifying law enforcement, they're reluctant now because they're starting to feel like there's no point. Now, are they looking for their partner to be sentenced to years and years and years of time? No, but they do want them held accountable for what they're doing. So, as a lifelong victims advocate, I wanted to pass that along to all of you. I know this is top of your agenda. Senator, you had mentioned victim advocacy services within law enforcement. In Suffolk County, my agency, Ally Against Domestic Violence, we have professional advocates that they work with my agency, and they serve survivors of domestic violence directly in all of the Suffolk County police precincts. So I just want to put it out there that we are there. We are underfunded. There's a tremendous need for funding. I'm not going to bore you. Our funding is pieced together. It's piecemeal at this point. Some from the county, some from the police department, some from probation, some from New York State, and it's all trying to piece it together and make sure we have the staff there. So I'm not going to load this up on a funding issue, but obviously that's a prevailing thing, because how can agencies like ours continue to provide immediate services to those whose lives are in danger? We need to have the staff on the ground to be able to do so. And our advocates in the precincts, they are there to respond. As soon as law enforcement is done, our advocates step in. In regards to the parole issue that's been brought up multiple times, we have a survivor. I'm not going to give any more information other than the defendant was sentenced to a rather short period of time on multiple attempted murder charges, multiple criminal contempt charges, assault 2 charges, and the sentence alone was not long enough. Water under the bridge, nothing we can do. However, he was released early because of the reforms. So now this woman, who is incredibly strong, and she's permanently disabled and will be for the rest of her life. She has tremendous emotional healing that she's working on. She's dealing with PTSD. And him getting out early just made her feel like her life doesn't really matter. Combined with that issue, something came to light with parole. And I think it might be a funding issue for parole in Suffolk County. Maybe it's a procedural thing. I'm not 100% sure. This person was put on GPS monitoring when he was released. What has that done? It's given the victim a false sense of security, because come to realize during the overnight hours, there's no enforcing when there's a hit on the proximity indicator that this person is approaching her home. What parole is doing is they're monitoring it. They get the notification in the morning when they come in. And when I said, well, what is the victim supposed to do? Well, call 911 when he or she is forcing entry into the house. And this is an individual who proved that when the crime occurred, they set out with the intent to kill her. So that has got to change, because that's leaving her feeling like, once again, my life is not that important. Luckily, the Suffolk PD has increased patrol around her home, so on and so forth, but that is a problem that needs to be remedied sooner rather than later. I have brought it up to some state agencies. I don't know what the remedy is going to be, but it has to be rectified.
You brought up a point, it was brought up before about the reluctancy of the victims to move forward when they don't feel like they're being protected or heard even. Are you seeing that firsthand? Like, are you really starting to see that more and more where they say, look,
Yeah,
I'm afraid it's going to be more dangerous. So I'm
what
just
I
not gonna do
conveyed
it."
to you is coming from some survivors that we are serving at our agency. So we help them on the initial incident. They're disclosing to us additional incidents that are occurring, but some are choosing to not involve law enforcement. They're not faulting law enforcement. You know, they're not pointing fingers. They just feel like, for what? You know what I mean?
I would say the same.
It's not
We have
for
that experience, too.
prosecutors' lack of trying, and, you know, the PD is making the arrests. Prosecutors are asking for bail. They're asking for stronger orders issued at arraignment. They're being denied every day. They're asking for GPS monitoring when being released at arraignment. They're being denied every day. So all the systems are in place that could be helping, but right now, I feel like things have taken a slide back, like DA Tierney had mentioned. The revenge porn law in the state of New York, I do feel very strongly about. We have survivors who are being crippled by fear. And why is this occurring? The offender is threatening them that if you leave me, I am going to unleash these images that either you consented to me having or not. You didn't even know I have them. And it's not a crime in the state of New York to do that right now. And it is another means of manipulating and controlling the victim into remaining in a life-threatening situation because they don't want their job to see this. They don't want their kids seeing these things. They don't want and I know it's passing in the Senate, and thank you to those, Senator Murray, who co-sponsored, and I know Senator Martinez intends on pushing forward again in January, but any help that we could get with the Assembly to try to get this going, because it is horrendous what people are dealing with. And then last but not least, and I don't know if this is something that's accomplishable by legislation, but there is a strong link between domestic violence and gun violence. Where there are guns present, the risk of homicide increases exponentially. And orders of protection, while there is a weapon seizure clause on them, law enforcement is limited in what they can do. I know in some parts of the country, the order of protection acts as a search warrant. In New York, it doesn't, so I don't know if that's something that could be explored, but it would help enhance survivor safety. It would help law enforcement do their job. And, you know, if it's something that could be explored, if I can give you more info, you know, at a later date, I would be more than happy to.
Do we have any questions?
The case involving the woman, the survivor from Delaware County, was she a survivor from Delaware County as well? Was there a history of domestic violence in Delaware County? Do we know?
There's a reported history through family narrative, but the police were never involved. And neither was CPS in what was going on with the children. It came out much later. All the domestic violence that was happening in the home came out later.
And what about in Suffolk County? Were there prior incidents, police responses to?
The family actually lived up in Delaware County, and he murdered her in Delaware County. And then the family the surviving children,
And that's how you
came
became
down
involved.
here and live on Long Island.
Okay.
Yeah.
Briefly, do you believe lethality instruments should be used statewide?
Do I believe what?
Lethality instruments should be used statewide?
You mean Jacqueline Campbell assessments? Absolutely.
Okay.
Jacqueline Campbell, in fact, here in Suffolk County, a number of years ago, there's a law that was passed that requires the use of the Campbell assessment and also the Crime Victim Center to provide training on that. And every year we do a virtual conference, and we include the Jacqueline Campbell herself does that training live, and anybody across the state can log into that.
Are they using it regularly? Is that a countywide protocol?
I know that we use it
Service
for victim
providers?
service providers.
We
They're
use
doing it?
Yeah.
I
Okay.
know there's
She
a
does
push
it,
to have
yeah.
law enforcement administer, they have different lethality assessments for law enforcement to use. I know there's a push to have local law enforcement as a matter of law
Right, but
conduct them.
we passed that bill in the Senate. And
Yeah.
again,
Um,
it has not moved in the Assembly.
No,
You know?
it's almost impossible to move anything that is related to crime and protecting the community. It's impossible to move it out of the Assembly.
Right.
It is the greatest betrayal we've ever seen in this state. We saw more positive legislation passing under Governor Pataki than we did in the history of this fine state. And betrayal is probably is not a strong enough word for what we feel. We were told early on, if you remember this, it started like trickling down from the federal level somehow that we're supposed to be preparing survivors for them to understand that offenders may get out of jail earlier. There's going to be some changes. And we were asked, as an agency that's funded by the federal government, to start to normalize that. So what's happened is it's normalized and desensitized a lot of folks in the community. And like Wendy said, to dovetail on that, there are folks that are just not calling the police because they just know that nothing's going to happen anyway. So why bother? But I mean, the family court orders of protection, we're getting temporary orders of protection. That's a really positive thing. But that's only in the family court. That's not, that's the intimate partner.
It is very difficult these days to
Well,
obtain
thank you
an
both,
order
and
of
thank you
protection.
for your
Of course.
length of service in
course.
this area. Appreciate it, both of you.
We have time for like one or two questions.
I just want to say thank you so much, Laura and Wendy, for all you do. And I was just on the phone with Laura yesterday because I just received a phone call, and I don't know if Pastor Lynn, if she.
Yeah, she did. She called.
And there's somebody she's frightened. 4 kids. She's just very frightened, and I'm so glad that you guys are there for our victims
Well, thank you for
because.
saying that, because when we hear folks talking about they have to go tell the victim the bad news about, certain pleas, and they're very trauma informed in both Nassau and Suffolk, we're the ones, and our staff are the ones that have to pick up those pieces. And we have to help people to restore their sense of safety in their lives, and it's not easy when you don't have laws that are protecting them.
And they were frightened also too because they did go to
Right. Right.
police, and you guys are somebody so special to talk to that they don't have really anybody to talk to. I mean, maybe they have family members, and they don't know you guys are going to give the right advice. And thank God we have you guys because we know what's happening. The governor tried to do something with Discovery; it did not work. We know how we were hoping something was going to happen. Cassius bail is a total disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that we would love to see, something to move forward. But you're right, the Assembly, they do not want to pass anything, and it's just a real shame. I mean, I got to say, things like this with the Senate, we do, push, and I got to say with these two gentlemen, my colleagues, also doing a great job on our side. But it's just heartbreaking. It really is that people don't, we don't want anybody to be incarcerated. Trust me, but we want to make sure that, in other words, this is called preventive maintenance. In a lot of ways, and thank God for you guys that they have somebody to talk to at all hours of the night. Thank you.
It is all hours of the night.
It
isn't
is all hours.
No, I know. Trust me, Laura. We know each other a long time.
I want to just piggyback real quick, and then I know we are up against the clock. But I want to piggyback real quick, Wendy, on something, and both when you talked about the revenge porn and the threats, basically like extortion.
Sextortion.
That
Sextortion,
also
yeah.
applies to pets, to animals.
Oh, Senator,
threats.
you know my
You tweet
feelings.
her.
But the threat of
Harm.
we're going to harm your pet if you try to leave, or you're going to do this. Is that, or do you see that? Is that a sometimes I say this to people and they don't believe it, but is
No.
that real?
That is a real link There are threats to harm or kill the family pet as a means of continuing to control the victim into staying. Unfortunately, at my agency, we have had pets that are killed or maimed. For that reason, we're fortunate that we can have pets included on orders of protection in the state of New York. I am very proud to state that my agency is the only shelter on Long Island that does allow pets to come in with their family, because leaving them behind can cause them
Trauma.
a grim outcome. And a pet is a member of the family. You don't want to separate them. But that is a very real link and a very real threat that is made on a daily basis. I would like to see law enforcement routinely look at the health and well-being of the pet when responding to domestic incidents. I know a lot of officers do. I am very, I know Nassau County, Suffolk County, they are very active now in prosecuting crimes of animal abuse and neglect. But we still have to work more to bridge that gap and make it be known that where there is domestic violence, the animals in the home are in danger. And everybody needs to understand where anybody is abusing or harming an animal, they are a threat to society in general.
Right.
That is a known fact, and this is something that has to be acknowledged. And anything that we could do to strengthen the response, we're right here.
Is there anything legislatively that can be done?
I've added something, I introduced legislation regarding orders of protection. If you have an order of protection and you harm the animal during that order, it is automatically bumped to a felony. So it hasn't, I'm working on trying to get it to move. So
Well,
we'll,
opening up the dialogue
If the animal
is
is included on that
That's-
order of protection,
that's
and
the
they
area.
then harm the animal, and DA Tierney can answer this better, would that then make it
A criminal contempt?
a criminal contempt one? Because what's a criminal contempt one? A violation of an order of protection with an act or threat of violence. It shouldn't matter whether that was made towards the human
The child?
or the animal in the home.
as long as it's included on the order
Right,
of protection.
right.
Right.
They put animals on orders of protection?
Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
I don't, you have to look
It's
at
family
the
court, that's
definitions.
why.
There's separate animal cruelty laws.
yes.
And I think that it would be a criminal contempt, but under the law, and I could be wrong, the victim would still, the victim of the crime would still be
The human.
The abused human.
Mhm.
In other words, you're trying to hurt the battered person by going, by hurting their animal.
Mhm.
So there's, so you could charge that, so you could charge them criminal contempt, being the victim, I believe, but also there are separate agricultural and markets law violations that you can charge with regard to injury to the animal. And also to answer your other question is, and Dean and I have talked about this, we don't go to the state anymore when we need laws. We go to our county legislature. So we've done an animal cruelty registry through our county legislature. We've done dumping laws through our county legislature. We've also done street racing laws or street takeover laws that we've done through our county legislature. While the gentlemen who are not sympathetic, and I talk to them all the time, while they're interested in this, right now the way the legislature is situated in the state, when you talk about any kind of change in laws, they're saying that you're trying to increase penalties. And our answer would be no. We're trying to make more commonsensical laws, but it's really a non-starter.
Yep.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. We're going to take, thank you, ladies.
Thank you
very
both.
much.
Thank you
We're
for
gonna
having us.
continue the conversations, but we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to, for everyone to stretch their legs, and then we're going to bring up the victims and the families, and we'd like to hear from you. So thank you. Okay, we're going to start back up here. I want to make sure that we have ample time to listen to our crime victims and the loved ones. If you don't mind, I'm going to read as quickly as I can. We did have a crime victim, Carrie Chavis, who was supposed to be here tonight. She got very sick, so she has sent me her testimony that I'll try to read as quickly as I can. And I think it'll indicate what we're about to hear, and that is the actual impact of crime on people, on how it impacts you directly. So it starts, good evening. I would like to thank you for extending the invitation to give me the chance to tell my story. My name is Carrie Chavis. I am a 47-year-old registered nurse in the emergency room for the last 17 years. As of last year, I am also a widow with an 8-year-old son. On September 10th, I arrived home with my son after work around 8 p.m. My son Decker was walking up to the house in front of me when we noticed the front door of my built-in porch was open. I asked him to step back. As I looked in, I noticed that the screen to one of the windows was bent and on the floor. Internally, I started to panic, and at that point, my son quickly realized that someone broke in. He was hysterically crying, asking if someone was in our house. I stood on the lawn looking at all the windows to see if there were any open or broken. With that, as I was calling 911, 2 police cars actually pulled up with their lights on and asked if I had called. I told them no, but I was just about to. They realized that my elderly neighbor across the street had called because this man had tried to get into her door as well. I showed the officers the footage from the cameras of the man, clearly on drugs and scary looking, breaking into my house. My son was absolutely petrified. More police cars showed up, and they started looking into the woods. They came back into my yard to check the sheds. They also came into the house and checked every room to try and give my son some peace of mind. As they were leaving, they said they would let me know if they found him. In the meantime, Decker had asked if he could sleep with me in case the guy comes back. All he kept saying was he wished his dad were here. And what if the man comes back and gets in? What if he hurts us? I now have a little boy that not only has had his world turned upside down in the last year, but now he feels unsafe in his own home. About an hour later, the officers came back and said they found him. I said, great, is he in jail? Nope, not at all. They said he was given a desk appearance ticket. A desk appearance ticket for someone on camera breaking in, no question about it. Decker came up behind me and asked him if they had caught him, and the officers said yes. They left it at that because they knew how scared he was. After learning the man's name the next day, I decided to learn more about him. Well, when I looked him up on Google, there were many articles related to him. Other searches showed that he has a criminal record 20 miles long for arrests and jail time, including burglary, drugs, kidnapping, and hostage holding. When I looked him up on web crims, I guess that's crimes maybe, I don't know, he was arrested the week before the incident at my home and had 2 more run-ins the week after. The idea that this person is out walking around is mind-blowing. Just last week, the ADA reached out to me to let me know that this person has now missed 3 court dates and now has a warrant out. Circling back, I cannot comprehend why this individual has been allowed so many chances to keep committing crimes. He's one of 1,000, I'm sure, or thousands rather, in this state where criminal acts don't meet the criteria to just be sent to jail and locked away. These career criminals who contribute nothing to society have no fear because there is no accountability. They know that they'll continue to be let out. My fear is that this is only going to worsen, especially with our governor wanting to close more jails upstate, which, by the way, has happened. There will be nowhere left to house these individuals. And she wraps it up when I think back to September 10th, I just keep thinking, thank God we missed him. When I look at the cameras and the times, we only missed him by 5 minutes. What would have happened if he came right up behind us? I had nothing in the house to protect us. I have a son who has slept in his own bed a handful of times since then. He won't go out front in the dark, even for something quick, unless I'm with him. He doesn't feel safe, and frankly, neither do I. I'm hoping for significant change in bail reform in the state. I pray for the officers that keep us safe, as I know they are frustrated too. Crime can't win. We have to do better. This is a mom with an 8-year-old son. I mean, if we can't feel that pain, and the thing is, when we keep victimizing her and her son over and over again through these terrible laws that we have, this is what you get. This is the pain that just doesn't go away. So I wanted to share that and thank Carrie for sharing that with us. But we want to hear from you. So I didn't read it in the beginning, but I will, if you'd like, I'll read everyone who is with us right now. We have Elisa and John McMorris. We have, hold on, we have Teresa Bliss. No, Kathy and Jack are not here. Carrie's not here. And then we have Jennifer Driver and Tabitha Goodmiller along with us today. And Teresa, I believe your husband is providing support from the back row there. But thank you all for being here. So if you'd like to start off, Lisa and John, with your story, we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Something like this is so important for our voices to be heard, because I cannot tell you how often we have felt that our voices have not been heard through this entire ruling process. For those people who don't know, my son in fall of 2018 was hiking with his Boy Scout troop and with his father when a drunk driver plowed through the entire line of scouts, popping off each one of them, ending with Andrew screaming into the air after being struck by a 4,000-pound vehicle and landing in deafening silence in front of his friends, in front of his scoutmaster, and devastatingly in front of his father. What led beyond that, outside of this horrible devastation of a house without a vibrant 12-year-old, was us being thrust into a criminal justice system that we didn't understand. From private investigators at our home asking to find the last pieces of clothing that my son wore that were put in a bag that they gave me at the hospital, that I had to hand that over to an investigator. There was a moment in the hospital that I remember looking at all of the things on the ground, blood-soaked sponges and stuff, and wanting to gather them all up, because they're the last thing I have of my child. And we sat there as he took his last breaths, and we whispered to him as we played Somewhere Over the Rainbow on the ukulele, which was a song that Andrew played. And I promised him that as my tears dropped onto his face and blood soaked down his streak, that I would stop this from ever happening to anyone else. The hard part about that was that when we sat in the courtroom, it felt like we were sucker punched. We did not feel like victims. It was almost like second class. That, well, it was a vehicular crime. And then we started hearing about all of the loopholes or all of the things that can't be charged. And we went to hearing after hearing after hearing. It felt like the system was built from everyone except us, the victims. We need a system that recognizes the value of the lives lost. And what I want from our legislators, from everyone making our laws, that when you're reading these things, I need the pictures of our lost loved ones to come off of the page. Because every time we make a law and we enact it and we think we're doing the right thing, there is unintended consequences. We were given a life sentence without our son. But that is not how vehicular crime is looked at. An aggravated vehicular crime, homicide, is a violent crime. But it's not in the legislature. It's considered nonviolent. But I assure you that being struck by a 4,000-pound vehicle with a child's body that's barely 5 feet is violent. I'm here today not only for the memory of my child, but on behalf of every family who's lost a loved one, because it is so important that our voices are heard. And there are oftentimes I feel like it's gone on empty. I'll talk about I've walked the halls of Albany quite a number of times. I've walked nationally at DC. And everyone's really sympathetic, but then there's nothing next. It ends with beautiful handshake and a hug and a love, where I do believe that they felt my beautiful baby's loss. But there's nothing that steps next. Vehicular crime is a crime. It should be treated no differently than if there was a loaded gun, because that is what that 4,000, 5,000-pound vehicle was. It was a loaded gun, and you know better. And when I think about these kinds of grouping, I think we should do more of them. I think we need to talk more. I want to give the other victims an opportunity to talk, but I don't consider us victims, we're survivors. Because we survived the worst possible thing we could ever survive. And what we need is the people in Albany, the people in the legislature, to take the next step. I'm really tired of hearing the explanations. All they sound like are excuses, because our choices have consequences. And I am proud to stand with District Attorney Tierney at Choices and Consequences, where John and I go into every high school, as many as we can in Suffolk County, and talk about this. And I get calls from parents that say thank you to help them make a change. But what I remember the most was sitting in the courtroom and hearing charges being dropped, a sticky note that didn't appear, or and then me going back and trying to hold myself together and talking to my ADA. I'm like, what happened? And that, I talk about that as my Schoolhouse Rocks moment, because that's the moment that I said I created Andrew's Law to make aggravated vehicular homicide a violent crime. Because I started realizing just how many things were getting lost. But I shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to sit with my husband and revel in the joy of my beautiful boy and how he used to sing and dance and play the instruments. We're coming into Thanksgiving, and there's going to be an empty chair at our table, as many of us will have an empty chair that is so loud. That empty room, that empty bedroom is so loud. And on Friday, I'm blessed that Andrew's friends, who are now 19, come back to my house on they come back from college or wherever they are, and they help us decorate. Because that first year, I could not even imagine putting up a Christmas tree, but it was Andrew's favorite holiday. He used to run around in a Santa costume, and I thought, I can't betray my child like that. And so they came back, and every year they come back and they help us decorate. And we have a moment where we hang up an empty stocking for Andrew every year. And they stuff little letters in there of the things they want to change. And the number one thing they say is that we don't want this to happen to anyone else. And that is what I want to leave with you.
The problem is the numbers are going in the wrong direction. I know we're not talking about drunk driving per se, but the numbers of drunk driving are going up constantly, especially in Suffolk County. We were actually told that the numbers are equivalent to a 737 crashing each week plus a little bit more. So think about that. You saw in the newspaper every single week a 737 Airjet crashing and no survivors. That's the amount of people that die due to a drunk driver. That can be prevented. We can do something about this. And we need the government to enhance these laws so this prevents it happening again. We're going in the wrong direction. We can actually do something about it.
You take the interlock. We used to be the leader with the interlock. We now only put them in 26% of the offenders' cars. That's an awful number. Why not? We see people pleading down to lesser charges.
Lesser charges.
And it's not required. So here we go, is that little spot where we talk about those 700 empty spots in the jails. And let me tell you, is that I sat with offenders who said that being incarcerated, now these are Suffolk County, they were able to get the treatment they wanted. And there's one other thing I remember. We were sitting in the hearing room, and it was in between, we were in a recess for our case, and they were bringing in other people to be talked. And one gentleman had come in, and he had a drinking and a drug problem, and they were deciding whether or not he was going to be released early. And the offender said, "I'm right in the middle of my treatment program. Can we extend this 2 weeks so I can finish my treatment?" Because he said, if I get out, I won't be able to finish my treatment. Mm-hmm. So this is not about penalty. This is about saving victims and offenders, helping the offenders, because in our case, 2 families have been shattered. And in all of these cases, we need to do better. For Andrew, for the other victims, we just need to do better. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Good evening, everyone. My name is, closer? Is that, okay. My name is Teresa Bliss. Some of you here tonight may be familiar with me from my legislative advocacy. I have testified in Albany and spoken publicly many times in opposition to pro-criminal parole and sentencing reforms, and in support of strengthening public safety, victims' rights, and opposing proposed bills and laws that prioritize offenders before victims. But tonight is different. Tonight we were asked to share our personal experiences and to highlight where the system failed crime victims and co-victims. And unfortunately, my family's experience contains multiple failures. Failures in communication protocols, failures in victim notification, failures in probation oversight, and failures in basic human decency. On March 24, 2021, my 25-year-old son, David, was murdered in broad daylight in the village of Port Jeff by a group of 3 individuals, all of whom were unknown to my son. They were complete strangers to him. On that day in March, David and his younger brother Jacob headed down Port to order pizza. David walked into the pizza place, placed the order, and intended to take a short walk down by the water. Kids were walking by, people were grabbing coffee, going to the bank, riding bikes. You get the picture. I'm sure many of you here have visited Downport. There's the ferry, restaurants, waterfront, an area you assume is safe. And yet in that very village, 3 individuals were armed with handguns and knives, smoking blunts while driving down Main Street, yelling, cursing, using racial slurs, holding up gang signs to just about everyone they passed. The passenger in the vehicle yelled out to David, "What's poppin'? I'm going to F you up." David yelled back as the vehicle drove past. The 3 individuals proceeded to turn the car around because they initially intended to stab him. As David was standing on the sidewalk, the vehicle stopped. 2 of the offenders exited the vehicle. A verbal altercation occurred. The shooter then went back into the vehicle and retrieved his handgun and shot David. They then fled the scene, all while high-fiving one another, joking, laughing, and mocking David as he held his abdomen. The offender who fatally shot David was under active probation supervision. Approximately 18 months earlier, the same violent offender chased down and stabbed another individual, a minor, as part of a gang initiation. He was initially charged with assault in the 2nd degree, a violent felony, but the charge was pled down to assault in the 3rd degree, a misdemeanor. The court imposed probation instead of incarceration. During probation, the offender built ghost guns, regularly carried a loaded handgun, and frequently used marijuana, all clear violations of supervision conditions. No enforcement action was taken, and probation failed to properly intervene. The failures did not end there. They were about to get much worse. We experienced further failures that have significantly compounded our trauma. There were clear breakdowns across multiple systems. I knew something very serious had happened. I received a Suffolk County PD alert on my phone saying to avoid the Port Jeff area due to heavy police presence. I immediately called my son Jacob. He realized too much time had passed and David hadn't returned. When he went to look for him, he turned the corner and onto Main Street and walked into chaos. He immediately went up to a police officer in a panic and said, "My brother, he went to order pizza and he isn't back." No one told him anything. In fact, they wanted to put him in the back of a police car. My husband called the pizza place, and it was them who informed us David was shot, not law enforcement. As my husband and Jacob rushed home, I began calling every area hospital, asking whether a gunshot victim had come in. I left my name and number with each. We assumed because Stony Brook Hospital is a trauma center was where he would be taken, so we raced there only to find out he wasn't there. Desperate to find our son and any information, we drove straight to the 6th precinct. We went inside, a family visibly in crisis, only to be told by the desk officer, "Go wait in your car. There was no detective here, and one will come talk to you." So we did. We went back to our vehicle. alone in the parking lot with no support, no guidance, and no information. And while we're sitting in that vehicle waiting, a local news outlet on social media informed us our son was fatally shot. Not law enforcement, not a doctor, social media. The public, and now us, his family, knew my child was fatally shot before we ever got a phone call from anyone or spoken to in person. In fact, there was no communication that day or evening or into the night. The hospital never called, ever. We didn't even know what hospital or if he was even brought to a hospital until I had my first meeting with my assigned ADA. This is a failure of ethics, human decency, and respect. And now this is where I need everyone in this room to understand the depth of these failures. I was robbed of the chance to say goodbye to my son, my firstborn. I didn't get to hold his hand or touch his face, to hug him. I didn't get to tell him I loved him. That chance, that sacred moment was taken from me. But it wasn't just taken from me. What about what was taken from David? He wasn't a John Doe. He wasn't alone in this world. He has a loving family, people who adored him. He deserved dignity. He deserved to have us there. Instead, the silence, the dismissiveness, the total lack of notification made it feel as though he had no one, as though his life did not matter enough for someone to pick up a phone. During the trial, we learned there was detectives sitting with David's body at the hospital for hours, and still, no one thought to call his family. Did everyone assume someone else was notifying us? Well, no one did. That is something I will never heal from. It has complicated my grief and my trauma in ways that words cannot fully capture. And before I go further, I want to say, I'm going into this level of detail because on the day my son was murdered, the then mayor of Port Jefferson made reckless, grossly inaccurate public statements before law enforcement had even gathered the facts. Her misinformation led the public to make harmful assumptions. Her behavior was an embarrassment to her and her office and deeply harmful to our family. Public officials have a responsibility to communicate responsibly, especially in moments of violence. In our case, that responsibility was completely abandoned. I also want to be clear about something because it matters. I am not anti-police. I am not that person. I am not here to criticize officers or detectives who were doing their jobs. The detectives that day were handling an active homicide. This is about acknowledging that police cannot simultaneously run an active crime scene and provide the emotional, informational, and logistical support that traumatized families desperately need in those first critical hours. This is why precincts need trained, on-call victim liaisons, people whose sole role is to communicate with families and hospitals while law enforcement handles the investigation. Families need support, detectives need support, and a liaison fills that gap so detectives can do their investigative work effectively, while families are treated with dignity and compassion. Families should never be left alone to piece together their own tragedy. Throughout my never-ending research and advocacy, I have learned that New York State, under Executive Law 575, has what's called a Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team. It was established under the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence in collaboration with the Office of OVS. This multidisciplinary team conducts post-case reviews of near-death and of domestic violence-related homicides, looking for systemic gaps, interagency failures, and opportunities for police policy reform. The team interviews survivors, local responders, reconstructs timelines, and issues aggregate findings and recommendations. But there is a major gap in this statute. Survivors of non-domestic homicide victims do not have access to the same level of systemic review, transparency, or accountability. There is no comparable statewide review mechanism for non-domestic violence homicides. The state loses the opportunity to learn where systems failed. Prime examples would be probation and parole oversight, and enforcement and victim notification procedures. This is why I reached out to Director of OVS, B. Hansen, and submitted a proposal to amend the executive law to include non-domestic homicide fatality reviews. Her response was she would consider and elevate my proposal. Every homicide, not just domestic violence, deserves the same level of examination, accountability, and prevention. My son's case is just one of many examples of how those systemic failures go unexamined. I want to thank Senator Murray and Senator Rollison for organizing this roundtable and for giving victims and co-victims a voice tonight. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Teresa, just a quick question. Did you ever get to the bottom, did you get an explanation as to why you did not get notified?
No.
Or who dropped the
No.
ball, or?
Who dropped the ball? I never really, I was in such shock. You know, we're dealing with everything we're dealing with at that time. I didn't even know he was brought to St. Charles until, like I said, I sat with my ADA. I had no idea. I actually thought maybe he died on the scene and like the medical examiner came and took him. We had no idea, none.
Sorry, very sorry to hear that. I meant to make this known. We also did reach out, and we wanted, I know parole and probation, that's a big issue, and so we did reach out to invite any member of the parole board to participate, and we received a short response. Thank you for this invitation. However, the chairman and board members are unable to attend this event. Have a wonderful week. So,
That says it all.
yeah, that was the response. So now if we could hear from both Tabitha and Jennifer, sisters of Sarah Good. If you'd like to tell the story, I'll. I know you're losing your voice. You might want to pull it closer.
Well, we didn't prepare like this either. So, our sister Sarah Good, in June 2014, on June 7th, 2014, she was brutally raped and murdered and dumped in the woods where we had to search for her. Her car was found abandoned, full of blood. Nobody wanted to tell us anything. We just did our own investigating. Like, they didn't even tell us when we figured out where the car was. They told us, don't go. And we were going. Like, you're not going to tell me I'm not going because I'm going. But when we got there, they didn't tell us, like, was she in there? Like, just, like, we're still investigating. Like, they just told us we all had to leave. We didn't leave. We stayed across the street until they opened the trunk to make sure she wasn't in there.
Right.
Eventually we left. We went to my mom's house because eventually they told us she's not in there. So that was actually on June 8th. We didn't know that she wasn't, we didn't know anything. So then we began our search. Like, we knew, so where her car was found, it was like on a road that just one side was just all woods. And then at the end, then there was a cul-de-sac with, I think at that time there was only 1 or 2 houses and then just woods. So, and that was at like 10 p.m. on a Sunday night. So then Monday, they were all searching. So we were like, okay, if they're searching, then we'll search over here because they must be searching for something. So my issue was when we started to search, they were more like worried about like if our cars had inspections or like stuff like that, and not saying like if you search here then you're going to ruin something. Like, they were just, no, you can't do this. So we didn't listen. I mean, now we know reasons why, but just tell us the reasons. They literally went to every single car that was parked on the side of the road, who are people who were helping us search, and ran everybody's plates and their registration to make sure those were valid cars. So then we just set up search parties. Like, so if they were in this part of the woods, then we let them do it. Then we just went on the other side. Then when they were done, then we would go over that way. We did start out, so where Sarah was found, she was found in the cul-de-sac, but right next to it was like a big like sump, and like people just, I guess at night they just hang out and burn stuff or whatever. So we were in that part, and once we found them over there searching, we left. So had we still continued, we would have found her the same day. But we didn't. So like almost a week later, somebody from our search parties found her. And then the person that murdered her, he would like instigate us like across, like we would be in a parking lot with everybody, like just, okay, we heard that maybe something was found over here. Like we would just send search parties anywhere. Like if we heard something, we sent somebody, like somebody was in that area, like somebody, it didn't matter what we heard, we were doing it. But then like, when we started going to court, like so she was found June 12th. The murderer wasn't arrested till July 12th, a month later. They let us know at like 1 a.m. or something in the morning that they were bringing him back from Florida. At that point, we just already had a feeling that's who it was. Like, so we already knew. We knew he fled. One of Sarah's friends, her mom, or mother-in-law, she saw him leaving. She actually saw his family packing their car with his suitcases to let him run away. So when he came back, my issue was in the court, they didn't warn us like everything they were gonna say. So like some of our family, against our wishes, brought little kids. So now these little kids heard the graphic details in the court. We didn't know that was gonna happen. Nobody did. If they did, they wouldn't have brought their kids. We wouldn't have brought some of our nieces in there. Like, then like when the court case happened, it was almost like we were the criminals. We got in trouble. We couldn't even have like our in memory of Sarah stickers on our cars. We couldn't even have a picture of Sarah on our own houses. Like we were told to take them down. Like we couldn't even grieve our own family member.
Did you have any kind of victim advocate working with you at that time, or was there anyone?
At first, no. But then I think.
Well, we had Irma. So Irma was
yeah.
the Crime Victim Center. So she came sometimes, and then Paula came, but they weren't there every time. Like they knew we were going, whether it was just the paper conference or whatever those were called, I can't remember. But even that, the judge would say, well, you don't have to come. Like, yes, we do. We're coming. You're talking about my sister. A lot of times we didn't know about the next court date unless we came. Like, nobody told us. So we literally had to just keep on top of it ourselves. When the jury selection, they told us, do not come. Like, we weren't allowed to come in the courtroom. When the trial started, literally I felt like we were in high school. Like, we weren't allowed to do anything, nothing. Like, that Things family, they had to be escorted out of the courts. Like, the first day of the trial, we were sitting on one side, and that Thing's mom came and his family, and the court officers literally were trying to tell us to move, and they were like, well, that's his family. My mom, my sister's mom, that's her family. Like, that's her mom. Like it was so messed up, some of the stuff that we had to go through. So then, okay, so he got convicted. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. A year later, so that was July, I think 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Then a year later, October 7th, 2017, he killed himself in jail.
But he filed an appeal
So
before that,
he did.
correct?
They filed an appeal right after. So when he killed himself, nobody alerted us. We heard it through the grapevine. So my husband's aunt works with that thing's aunt's friend, somebody associated with them, and she heard that he died.
You just heard it through the grapevine.
I heard it through. I was at
And
work.
it was only like it was like 2 days later.
No, it was the next.
Oh, no,
it was
the next day.
it was
Mine
the
2
next
days later.
day, and so my husband wasn't even going to tell me because I'm at work and I'm pregnant, and he didn't want to hurt my feelings anymore that they were, or didn't know how I was going to act. Because how do you feel about that? So when I heard the news, because right before that, one of Sarah's friends that she went to school with, she was trying to call my phone and told me, I really need to talk to you. So my mind went to, because in jail he was allowed to get married. So my mind went to like, oh my God, he probably got his wife pregnant while he was in jail. Never once did I think they were going to tell me he killed himself. So then my husband, now I'm telling my husband, like, something's going on. Like, so now I'm really nervous. And where I work, I'm just with one person. And I'm like, something's going on because somebody texted me that she needs to talk to me. And now I've never heard from her. And now my husband's telling me I need to talk to you. So he told me. And like, when you get that news, it's so undescribable, the feeling. You don't know whether to be happy, like, sad that he's not going to suffer anymore, like so then you think, okay, it's over with, he's dead, like, all right, we don't have to worry about it. Well, January 2018, there's a doctrine called abatement ab initio. It's a common law doctrine that if you die in prison before you get to your appeal, all your charges get expunged.
As if you never did anything wrong.
It's just gone. Like, you did nothing because you died. So when we went to the hearing, the judge didn't even wait for like the ADA or the DA at the time to say anything. He just dropped.
After this all happened.
So
there
we
was a
never
hearing?
heard about this doctrine
Okay.
until this happened. So when it happened, my mom got a letter in the mail that all his charges are going to be dropped, that it'll be official on this date in the court. So we went, and I'm not even kidding, like, they didn't even speak to us. They didn't wait for them to come in the room. The judge just put it on the record and dropped the charges, and that was it. And he didn't want to hear from us, didn't wait to, like, he did that, and then the ADA came in, and like, even they were shocked, like, that's it? Like, what happened? Like, they don't even know what happened.
So, just to put on the record and clarify, so Jen and I had a conversation when we spoke about you coming here, and she explained the situation. We looked it up. Many in the audience, many out there might know of the Aaron Hernandez case. He was a tight end for the New England Patriots, and he was, I guess, tied in with gangs or something. He ended up getting convicted of killing, I think it was 2 or 3 people. Went to jail,
And he
was
27.
sentenced, life in prison, no parole. And while in jail, this was in Massachusetts.
Yes.
While in prison, killed himself.
He
That
knew,
same doctrine came into play.
Yeah.
However, Massachusetts has taken the step to reverse that. So his charges have been, his conviction, I should say, has been reinstated. And so that's something I think we need to look at here.
So, yeah.
And Sarah,
Very
this is the
hard.
only one in New York for
They-
a murder conviction to be overturned.
And the Massachusetts judge, I don't know if it was a he or she, actually, reinstated it because the doctrine is an outdated doctrine.
Right.
And originally, they didn't say this, but it wasn't meant for somebody who killed himself by suicide. Aaron Hernandez knew that if he killed himself, that doctrine was going to overturn his stuff. I don't know if that thing in our case knew the same thing. I mean, he didn't have any money. We weren't
Right.
fighting them for anything, but it
fact of
wasn't
the
meant
matter
for
is, though, now-
suicide.
Yeah, now that that happens, if you look in the record, the official record, and you say, who took Sarah's life?
Right. Who did it?
There's
then?
nothing there.
Yeah.
There's
So-
no one.
So are you
So
guys gonna
who-
help us find who killed
Right.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Because you're not gonna find one.
Right.
He's
He's-
dead
he's
by
dead.
suicide because he's a coward.
Yeah, so that means, that is something I'm telling you right now that we will be working on to try to.
That's what we need. I have a list of people
We've met
who
with
I have
a
met
bunch of
with
people
that
since
said that they were gonna write a bill, and I still do not have a bill.
nothing. We've met with countless
Since
people since
2017, when this happened. My first day was the Monday after we had this abated. And we're still waiting. Because
And
it
only-
matters, it matters.
It does
Just
matter.
because it's a piece of paper that says, you know, he killed himself, everything is abated, blah, blah, blah. It matters to us because we went through 2 years worth of this trial, hearings, and all of this stuff to get legal justice for Sarah. When we got it,
To throw
when we
it
just
away.
got slapped in the face
Like,
and it
what
was
was-
thrown away.
What was the point of trial then? Like, why? Why do that? And then now, like, now you think that that's over, right? No. So now we had somebody put him as the poster child for the HALT Act for solitary confinement. So every time we think we got past something, like you would think because he's dead, we wouldn't have to deal with anything else. Like her poor daughter wouldn't have to deal with anything else in this life about that part. Something else. So now he's the poster child for the HALT Act, where solitary confinement.
Like a literal post, they
like
put him on a
he was
poster
first
held
named.
up with HALT Act under it.
He should be in solitary confinement. He killed himself in solitary confinement. So like, it's crazy. It's
Do you guys have any, do you have any questions in particular for anyone? I just have a question for all of you, and it is, it just feels like you're already victims, or your loved one was a victim. Do you feel victimized again?
yes.
Every day. Every time I
There's
open my
no-
eyes.
Because it felt like what happened to us. We had to be so quiet. Don't wear red. Hide Andrew's
Right.
picture.
I wore red and
I
black
wore
every
Andrew's
day. Red and
fingerprint,
black.
and I was condemned for rubbing it. Like, what does she have on her neck? I understand very, very closely why we wanted to protect those things. I had a very good relationship with my ADA who said, look, we're trying to protect this. This is the reason why we're doing this. And I was lucky. I had that communication, mostly because I can't keep my mouth shut. So, and I'm like, look, I want to sit in Legal 101 here, okay? Every night, I'm like, I'm sitting in class for an hour with my ADA saying, now you need to explain why.
But if you weren't like that, you wouldn't have gotten the answers or the information that you
Right.
needed.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
She
But
she would answer any questions, but at first they also were trying to do a plea deal. We were like, absolutely not. There's so much evidence. Why are we going to do a plea deal? Don't ask it. Don't
There's the
ask
thing
us
about,
again.
if we talk about like something that all of us link together, because we have very different crimes,
Yeah.
Right.
is a communication and advocacy and liaison from the police department and the district attorney's office to us. In cases where we were lucky enough to get some of that, but that sucker punch that you felt at our at the first hearing, we didn't know, things. Now, again, there is a legal aspect. If someone had explained to us at that point, look, there are going to be things that you're going to hear.
That's what we said.
We can't tell you what they are because we're preserving the
Right.
case.
Right.
We need to preserve the case, but we need you to know
But
this is
even-
what's going to happen. After that, then I'm like, oh, because I felt nauseous finding out that somebody actually tried to stop the driver from driving. I didn't know that. And so and that part makes you, and we did have an advocate that came, but we don't have enough of them, and there's not enough of that because there's so many crimes. right? And that's the whole other piece that's, I didn't go through the list of things that I want you to change because it was a little nauseating when I was writing it. And it was like, 3 pages long, and there's only so much here. I think it's important for you to know our stories, know that we feel victimized by the system, only because they're trying their hardest, right? And I work at the district attorney's office. I really do adore them because they're doing such a hard job. And not only that, then let's just add more requirements on. Okay, now you have to have everything done in this amount of time. Police department, let's add this into this. We're compiling things, but we're not adding people to the payroll here. We're just going, okay, we need to narrow it down. And then the rest of our cases kind of get lost.
And then the things that matter to us just get pushed back down to the bottom of the pile. So when does it come back up? This person's criminal, I stole a piece of candy from the store, does not trump murder or, getting hit by cars
And, when we were first in this and we needed trauma help, I was handed a 10-page document to fill out to get reimbursed for therapy. And I remember, luckily, my advocate helped me fill it out, but it was so, I'm like, every
The paperwork was
time,
very complicated,
like
very
every
cumbersome.
time for $20 for whatever, or $100 for this. And I'm like, it ends up being thousands upon thousands of dollars. You know how much, the therapy that you need for years. But it really needs to be streamlined so that you don't feel like you're, I'm like, all right, well, you know what? We were lucky. The grandfather of one of the scouts that was hit was a trauma counselor that worked with first responders. So we were able to get something pro bono that way because we weren't gonna, it was hard to get it. And really what this comes down to is communication. It's education and communication, right? It's understanding why. Everybody here, if they were communicated to, would probably feel differently. Even if the answer is no, even if the answer is that I can't tell you that, and this is the reason why I can't tell you that. And sitting in the courtroom and hearing charges getting dropped, it was helpful to understand why. It didn't make any sense to me, but it was helpful to understand why. And I think the hardest part for me was when Andrew's sister and Andrew's friends, all these little kids, and not understanding why. And then hearing, and this is what my little nephew, he's 4 years old, he said to me, and we were sitting on the beach, and he's like, what would Andrew look like right now? And I said, he'd be 19, he'd probably be out there in the waves splashing around with you. And he goes, how do I know a bad man won't come get you guys? And what do you tell a 4-year-old? Is how do I ensure him that while driving home, a drunk driver is not gonna hit us, or somebody's not gonna come and rape you or get a gun? I can't. Right. Now, luckily, he had a very, spiritual family, and we were able to work our way through that. But yeah, that's the fear, that we wanna stop this from happening to anybody else, and anybody else going through, we wanna make sure that they're not feeling victimized.
I got this quick question. Why didn't they allow you to go into the courtroom? Did you ever find that out? Because you wanted to be there. You wanted to hear the sentence and all that.
Well,
So you wanted to
it's not that
go.
they didn't want us in the courtroom when they did the conferences. They just, I guess they thought it was useless to us.
If you have to go to work, you can go to work. You don't have
That's
to
what
be
they would
here.
tell us.
That's literally what
you
they
don't need
said.
to waste your time. No, we want to.
And they
we
said, I'm
want to
sorry,
be
you
here.
couldn't, they said, I'm sorry, you couldn't be in the courtroom?
The
or-
only
That was
time
for
they
jury
told us we
selection.
couldn't
Oh,
be
that
was jury selection. They
Okay.
told us to don't come. We didn't know that technically we probably could have. So
But,
we
yeah,
just
so I don't know
listened.
why we weren't, because she was.
Good.
We were told the same thing about jury selection, and I can understand how that
That-
might
that
be
I
prejudicial,
understand.
and we don't want to have anything else throwing it out.
So I can say, my office had nothing to do with either of these trials, and I said,
Yeah, it was before.
Right.
anything was done wrong.
They didn't, but we love Ray.
It means that I don't have, that I'm not defending me, I'm just, so what the prosecutors in those cases said is what will happen if you guys went into the courtroom, the defense would constantly say, they're making faces, and if we get a jury that we're really happy with, they would say, well, he established eye contact with the victim's family, they were talking together, and then we would say, Judge, that didn't happen, and the judge would then say, there's a chance the judge would say, well, let's just strike that, and let's just strike that juror, and we'll start over again. And so, again, I had nothing to do with that.
We understand now, it just.
And a good job was done on both cases. But I think that, just so you guys understand, just so everybody understands, that the prosecutors will tell you, because every protection extends to the defendant, because every sort of question is settled in favor of the defendant, the prosecutors probably said, we don't want to lose our jury or get a mistrial because of some misallegation that they say about you guys being in the jury, even though we know you guys wouldn't do anything like that.
So my only problem now is with the abatement thing is we're like one of only like, I don't know, 10, 13 states that follow this doctrine. Like, why can't we follow Massachusetts and realize like we're the only case in New York that's happened to so far? So why not follow Massachusetts, where they see that it's an outdated doctrine that wasn't meant for this kind of case? Why can't the judge can overturn it? Like, he literally just, okay, bye. Like,
This is why we want to change it.
But I think it might be also your very point. This is the only one. I don't. It hasn't come up, and I
can say it happens all the time.
There is one other case that I do know of that.
Yeah.
in New York?
Yes.
Because that's,
I don't want to say that.
But he died by suicide?
There is.
But he died by suicide?
Yes.
Just that. Just
No,
that.
no, this one was suicide. I do, yeah, I don't, no, there is one other.
It might have been after Sarah's.
It is after Sarah's,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that.
I've had. Am I doing that? I've had other cases where death of the defendant while a appeal is open. I've had it done in New York, under New York state law, as well as when I was a federal prosecutor.
I understand that, but
So that-
suicide, he gave up his right for that appeal.
So that's the law in New York State. In the Aaron Hernandez case, the top court in Massachusetts overturned that law.
It's not even a law, it's a
Well,
doctrine.
it's a common law doctrine, so
Yeah.
it's essentially, so you do two things. Law is established in a jurisdiction through two ways, through legislative or through the courts. So the courts reverse themselves.
Yeah.
And the top court overturned them. Good luck seeing that happen in New York State. And good luck, I know you guys would carry the bill.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have to either through the judges or through the legislature, you have to change New York state law.
But I don't think in Massachusetts they didn't change the law.
They just said we're not doing it.
That judge just
It's up to
abated.
the.
Judicial discretion?
Actually,
Yeah.
that judge dismissed it, and then then there was an appeal, and then the Massachusetts Supreme Court reversed the judge's decision.
So we have
It's
to
just a decision,
appeal
not a
an
law, though.
abatement.
Right?
Yeah, in here.
It's just a decision, so just that case, is it now gonna be common?
They changed.
They changed.
In Massachusetts, they changed the whole law.
Okay.
Oh, so I didn't know that.
I don't want to give anyone.
I don't think, I don't know
They
that
didn't change it, they just stopped using it.
No, they overturned it.
What the appellate court in Massachusetts,
Massachusetts Supreme Court overturned the doctrine and say it's no longer applicable in Massachusetts.
Yeah, so New York needs to do that.
So what we're gonna do is introduce it and take it. I think a lot of it is, if you asked 100 people if they knew that was a
Nobody
doctrine, a law or not,
Nobody would-
101 would say no. They
No,
didn't.
I've met
And so I
officials that
think by
don't.
us introducing it and getting it out there, and maybe it does pick up some steam, because this one's a no-brainer, it really is. And then it's just, listen, then there's no excuse. I mean, if we've introduced it, we've brought it forward, we've got it to the point where it can be done, say no. I mean, they're gonna be the ones saying no, so it's.
And then what can we do? Like, so when you introduce it, do you have a name on it already? Like, can we put it in Sarah's name like we've discussed?
I plan on it,
And
yeah.
then also, like, after you introduce it, what else can we do to push?
Promote it.
To push,
Well, we
like,
have a change.org already, but.
like we have a petition.
Change.com, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get you the
that
bill
has
number, the
over
name and
5,000
everything, and you
votes. I mean,
promote
Start
it.
the process, and then we start walking around the walls of all of Albany, making sure every single senator, every single assembly person knows what's happening.
Like, that's what
And
we
then
need help with,
We can
like,
work, I can tell
how-
you, but it's a long road, because
Yeah.
you can get the assembly and the legislator, and get the assembly and the Senate to agree on something, well, there we go. But then we have to get it across the governor's desk.
Do you know,
So-
when I called Washington DC, from Lee Zeldin's office there was a woman that answered the phone. Her name was Sarah, ironically. And I brought up the information about it. And she said, well, why don't you talk about jail reform and like fix jail reform? And I said, do you have any idea what I just said to you? I'm like, what I'm talking about has nothing to do with jail reform or jail in general. Nothing. And then she's like, no judge will ever look at this. It'll be at the bottom of the plate. I'm like, no, man, no,
That's
that's
not
not.
We're going to address it on this.
I have one more question. I know I'm pushing my luck, but so now say this gets passed, how can I go back to getting, like, that would be my ultimate goal. Like,
But
that's my
that
ultimate
was
goal in
exactly what we
life.
were trying to do when we first started. And
What?
yeah,
Yes,
Sarah
Sarah
Goodlaw.
Good's law, I would like it to say in honor
We
of
have the
Sarah.
petition online too, but
I think
it says
the-
everything in there.
The other piece
What?
about this is we're
Humanize it.
talking about the emotion of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
and just how important that piece is. How important that is, and that's where, like, when we're talking about funding for advocates and stuff, this is where that help is. You know, I do it with I sit with a lot of drunk driving, of people who have lost a child or someone to a drunk driver, and I sit there and they're like, so they're gonna get life, right? My baby got life, they're gonna get life, right? And that is probably one of the harder conversations that people had with me and that I have with others, and telling them about the statutes. Okay, 5 to 15, what I call the Common Core math of the judicial system, and when all of that has to come through. And even that, it's wider, right? Because depending on what the judge and what they say and all this, you know, there's so much consistency in sentencing would be helpful for vehicular crime, as well as making it as important, aggravated, and making it as violent as it is. So, you know, this is just the beginning.
Right.
You know, as we said, we're just getting started, but it's important for you guys to hear that. And thank you so much for hearing our voices, because I can't tell you how important it for us is to actually have people hear it. And then the next thing is hearing back from you in a month or two and saying, guess what, you know, listen to Senate blah, blah, blah hearing, and you'll get to hear it. Oh, the thing about you, we didn't hear it, like, we didn't know that our offender moved. OCVS, you know, when you register, they're like, oh no, I think that you probably did that wrong. I'm like, I'm a physician assistant. I know I didn't do it wrong. I am a working professional. And then because we weren't notified right away, and it was like there was a glitch in the email system and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
With us, with Vine,
Yeah.
they're supposed to alert us that he
Yeah.
died in prison, and I mean, we already knew, but we didn't get notified by Vine
Right.
ever.
Should have been
And we
And
all-
Web Crims, it is Web Crims. It's a website. You go, it's Web Crims, and you go on the website and you type in the
Yeah,
offender's
that's how
name
we
and what
found
district
all the
and where you
dates
are,
out. We would
and you
go
can
on
tell
there.
when their next court dates are.
Yeah.
So you have an idea, so that's, you know,
Yeah, that's how we figured it
it's
out.
Web
It
Crims,
is.
yes.
Vine.
Vines is the other thing that you sign
one
on
is
to.
alerts you.
Well, what- since
That's
it was
after
already-
they go to jail. That's after they're in jail already. Then that alerts you to if they move jails, if they're leaving jail,
If they're gonna
if they
go.
die. Like,
Well, he was already in state prison though. Wouldn't that have been under New York State docs to inform you, not Vine?
no,
Because-
it's fine
No,
because
Vine does.
eventually,
But see,
I
right
forgot
here
how long
is
we took.
that we,
Right. There should be better
we're
communication.
pretty
yeah.
well educated in our things, and we're already not necessarily knowing what we're supposed to do. Again,
I think the problem is when I talk about the parole hearing, the state doesn't do what they're supposed to do.
Right.
You know, when the parole, just take for example, parole hearing, we're supposed to get notification in a timely manner about a parole hearing. We're supposed to, victims' families are separately supposed to, you know, separate apart from whatever the DA's office should be doing. The state has to let them, they flat out do not do it in a timely manner, and there's really no accountability.
Right.
There's no communication between offices, any of these
I would
things.
submit that you were on purpose.
I have one more thing about parole, if I can really quick. So our case, we obviously didn't need parole, but like in our group, there is people that they going through the parole board. So this person's no longer on the parole board, but she married a murderer in prison, and then he got out miraculously on parole, and now he works for New York State.
So here you are, you having hardworking people.
Oh, yeah.
She was one of the main parole board
Some of the
people.
requirements that have changed, and you look at the composition, it is not, I mean, I used to, when I did cases, and I would counsel families and say, you know, he's gonna plead guilty to this, you can anticipate him, you know, serving approximately, I don't even do that anymore, because when you talk about all these things, we're talking about the parole system, which has become, I would argue arbitrary. When you're talking about the Domestic Violence Crime Survivors Act, when you're talking about fair and timely parole, when you're talking about elder parole, all of these bills, and then other proposed bills. So unfortunately, and I think that's the worst part of it all, is, you know, crime victims and their families want definitiveness. What does this mean? And if we're being honest, we say, well, we hope this is what it means. Does it mean that? It's out of our hands, and quite frankly, we don't know. And that's really terrible, because if you have a criminal justice system that can't be definitive, it can't be relied upon, and that's not a good system.
Yeah, and I don't think a parole board.
So, no, that's a good thing. That's a good
Thank
thing.
you, though.
So thank you. I want to
you.
thank a couple others. We just sit up here and look pretty, but it's the hard work that's done behind the scenes. So I want to thank the crew that helped put this together. My Chief of Staff, Penny Hines, Nicole Lamacchia, Kate Crudden, Mary Romeo, Rosemarie Salomon, Tom Cahill doing all of the video work, Sarah Giancana, and Shannon Fredericks. So if I missed anybody, I apologize, but thank you, everybody, for all your hard work and putting this together. And thank you especially for coming and sharing your stories. And we will continue to work and be in contact with you. I promise that.
Do I call you every day?